Got dreams of being a professional podcaster, but have no idea what you're doing?
This is impossible.
That's about to change.
A new kind of school.
Welcome to the Pod School Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the show, and greetings from exceptionally hot Queensland in Australia. Right now I'm staying with some family and I'm huddled away in the corner of my bedroom with a couple of pillows wrapped around my microphone, and I've had to turn off the fan and shut all the windows to make sure that the sound is as good as it possibly can be, and as a consequence I'm currently coming to you live from a sweatbox. So if everything goes silent at any point in this episode, you'll know I've passed out from heat exhaustion. Fingers crossed I can make it all the way through to the end. Today's episode comes from a question I received on email from Natalia. Remember, if you have any questions, you can always head to podschoolpodcast.com and send me an email at the contact page there. She was asking about how you get rid of self-doubt when it comes to starting a podcast. This is a huge thing for a lot of people who have never done any broadcast or podcasting or radio before. It's very easy sometimes when this is something you've done for a long time to take it for granted, that it's very daunting to sit in front of a microphone, to record your voice, to put something, anything out into the internet and ask people to listen to it. And it's easy to understand why people don't go through with it because of the fear of it not being a success at the end. So obviously this is going to be a personal thing for everybody, but if you're struggling with self-doubt about whether or not you can start your own podcast, I just wanted to talk through a few things. Obviously, I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not going to be trying to talk you out of it in any kind of textbook way, but just give you a few different ways to think about what you're doing and also some of the things that you can do to set yourself up for success. The first thing that I would encourage you to do is to practice and to remember that this isn't a radio show. And when you decide you're going to podcast and you set your gear up and you have your microphone there and you prep your content and you record your episode, none of what you record has to be made public. So my first piece of advice would be, don't tell people you're going to podcast until you're ready to do it. Having said that, sometimes it is great to have that accountability where you say, okay, this is going to be up by March, and to make sure that people hold you to that. But when you're just starting out, give yourself a bit of a break and realize that you can record episodes at home and practice actually releasing, practice getting into that schedule, practice putting content together, and just listen back to what you're doing and see what's working and see what's not. If that takes you 6 months to a year, that's fine. Podcasting will still be here, and better you release something that you feel is up to scratch. It doesn't need to be perfect, that's for sure, but just where you feel like, okay, I think I'm getting in the swing of this a little bit, because while waiting for perfection is never going to be something that you should do, and you should always leap quicker than you're ready to, at the same time, there is really something to be said if you are coming at this from nothing to spending some time to just get comfortable behind the mic, to feel like you know a bit about what you're doing, to get some of the structure down, and just to do that in the privacy of your own home where nobody else but you can listen to it. Listen back to those episodes critically, and then all of that content that you do, whether it takes you 6 episodes or 100 episodes or just 2 episodes to get in your groove, all of that content can be used again because nobody's hearing it. And when you do it a second time or a third time, it will be in much better shape than the first time you did it. So really make the most of the fact that nobody needs to hear what you're doing, and that you actually have an ability to record and to practice in front of a microphone and to do the episodes as if they were going to go live, but to spend that time getting comfortable so that you feel when you actually do release the first episode, okay, while this doesn't need to be perfect, I at least feel like I'm not just sitting behind a microphone going, oh God, what do I do? So make sure you're a bit kind to yourself and understand that this isn't something that if you decide you want to do it, you have to do it tomorrow. Even when I started my show, you've got to start somewhere, I had that idea percolating in the back of my mind for 1.5 years. Now, it wasn't a case of me getting comfortable behind the mic that was the issue, but it's easy to feel like, oh my goodness, I've got to get this idea out immediately. I have to do it now, but you don't. There is sometimes a better time for things, and just because you think of it now doesn't mean you can't wait a little bit practice and use that ability to record yourself and listen back to get yourself a bit more comfortable so that you feel more confident getting into it and actually asking people to listen to what you're shipping out. The other thing I'd remind you is that podcasting doesn't need to be an every week commitment for the rest of your life. I feel like some people think that once they start, they cannot stop and they'll be on the hamster wheel and that's it. You've got to come up with content forever and ever and ever. And yes, there are podcasts that have been running for years and doing that, but there are super successful podcasts that have only 6 episodes and are still continually getting listened to because people are still finding them. So if you feel like you want to give something a try, but you're scared about whether you can commit to it in the long term, maybe your idea is better suited as a 6-part season and you can trial the first 6 parts and do those 6 episodes, and then maybe you get into the groove of it and you think, oh my goodness, I could totally do this every week. Or alternatively, maybe you think, okay, that's 6 weeks done. Then I'll come back in another month and I'll do another 6 episodes. Or maybe I just do that 6-episode season and it wraps up really nicely in a tight little bow and that idea is done. And then I can go on to one of my other ideas. So don't set yourself up for the expectation that you have to be podcasting for the rest of your life. Granted, podcasting is a really long-term goal. So if you're just starting out, the idea of maybe having 6 episodes and building a gigantic audience off that isn't necessarily going to happen. However, you also do need to get your flying hours up a little bit. And so maybe if you just set yourself a more achievable goal, it's not going to be so terrifying. And if nobody listens, what's the big deal? This is really where it comes back to your why. Why are you doing this podcast? If you are doing it because you think, I want to leave my job, this is how I'm going to make my money, then please stay with your job because money doesn't always come at the end of a podcast. If you're doing it because you think you should be jumping on the bandwagon because it's rolling by, again, wait until the time is right for you. Podcasting will be here when you're ready for it. But it's really important that the reason you're doing this show is because you feel really passionate about the content, because you really want to make the content, and because you think that there's an audience out there who'll really benefit from it, whether it's because it's really entertaining or really informative, or it's just something that people will really enjoy. That's got to be the reason for doing it, so that at the end of the day, you'll be happy if one person listens to it or 1 million people listen to it. Don't set yourself up for unrealistic expectations or go into this with the end goal in mind, because you just never know where this is going to end up. It might be something that you do for 6 months and say, okay, that's maybe not for me. Or alternatively, it might gain momentum, it might build, you might think, oh my goodness, I'm really onto something here. You might build an audience really quickly and next thing you know, this thing gets out of control. So you just never know, but you have to just start from that initial desire to make the content and let the rest unfold. So just make sure you're doing it for the right reasons and not expecting the outcome, because you just really never know where it's going to end up. Of course, if you're somebody who, and I completely understand this because I'm totally like this myself, really feels like they need to know where the furniture is a bit before they actually jump in, of course, you could do my online podcasting course, Pod School, or you could also go and volunteer at your local community radio station. They're very, very good at being open to volunteers coming in and teaching people and training people up, and you can see how radio works and how people present on air and get a little bit of an understanding of the behind the scenes. Alternatively, if there's a radio school in your neighborhood or nearby, you could go and do a short course or a longer course and get some skills up. I was teaching at a radio school in Sydney called Afters, and we had a lot of people come in that just wanted to understand a bit more about how radio worked, because they wanted to do their own podcast. They wanted to get a bit of understanding of the technology and what they needed to do. And so that can really be helpful just to give you that tiny bit more confidence that makes you feel like, okay, I'm not going into this totally blind. I can actually do this because I know what needs to be done. So that can be a really good way to give yourself some confidence. And you can, of course, find all the information about my online podcasting course, Pod School, at the podschoolpodcast.com website. So, Natalia, I hope that has helped you think a little bit differently about jumping in the deep end. And if you are having doubts about your ability or whether you can do this, remember that you don't have to turn up to a radio studio and do a shift in front of 1 million people. This is a private exercise until you decide it's time to go public. So get your equipment and take the opportunity to really practice and get to a point where you feel like you're ready to let your show out into the world. You've totally got this. I have complete faith in you, and I know that you can do it. Thanks so much for listening to this episode. If you have any questions, just like Natalia did, please send me an email at the contact page. If you're finding these tips helpful, I would love it if you would leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. It just helps other people find the show. Right. It is time to dab this sweat moustache and sweat beard away, and I'll see you next week. Until then, happy podcasting.
That's all for today.